Hi, my name is Muraly Srinarayanathas, and I'm very excited to be on the podcast of Culture Matters.
Hi, Murley. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Do me one more favor. No, no, not one. Do me one favor and pronounce your last name one more time. I'm not going to even try.
Sure, Chris. It's Sri Narayanathas.
Isn't that split up in Sri and then a last name? That's what I've been taught.
Yeah, no, there are many people who have it in that way. Actually, my grandma kind of made up this name. We had a very famous, I have a very famous great uncle, great uncle or great uncle, and his name was Narayana,
Mhm.
and my grandma added the Das and the Sri at the beginning. He also got some title for recognizing his philanthropy back in Sri Lanka. So anyway, this is. I don't know if folks are familiar, but this Sri Narayana Das is actually my father's first name.
Okay.
And we alternated as you go into the generations, but when we came to Canada here, it became our family name. So my kids have this last name as well, but originally it's my father's first name.
Okay. It's I'm going to ask because like I said, before recording, I don't prepare much. So questions come up as they go.
Please,
As in,
please.
and we're going to talk about your book and books in a moment as well. Don't worry. So that'll be part of the
Okay.
podcast. Don't worry. It's I've been married to an Indian for about 10 years, and her parents didn't know, at least her father didn't know his exact birthday. Do you know your exact birthday?
For me, yeah, well, I was born in the UK. So yes, I know my exact
As the
birthday.
date, as in, because he had it was either this or that. It was a couple of months in difference.
Yeah, when I did work in Bangladesh, we found that that was quite common. They had their birthday and then they had a passport day. Everyone
Exactly.
conveniently was like January 1st or something. But no, my parents know their birthday and my grandfather, yeah, I'm not sure why that's different in some parts of India, I guess, and Bangladesh, but for my parents in Sri Lanka, they definitely know their exact date.
Okay, all right. He didn't. I'm just curious because okay, I know a little bit about yourself, and so we're easing ourselves into this the content of this podcast because I don't know you very well, but we had a bit of a pre-talk. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you're from, what do you do, and what is your cultural frame of reference? And cultural frame of reference for me is more than 2 weeks in Cancun, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, so look, my family is from Sri Lanka. We're Tamil Sri Lankans,
Mhm.
and my parents met and fell in love while they were in school in the UK.
Oh.
And so my brother, my sister, and I, we were all born in the UK. 0 to 7, I lived there. In that 0 to 7 period, because my parents were still students and I was a surprise. They were kind of struggling, so they sent me back to Sri Lanka to live with my grandparents for about a year. I had my first birthday in Sri Lanka, in Jaffna, and came back to the UK. And then when I was 6 was the first time I went to Canada in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So 0 to 7, Chris, for those who know about child development, that 0 to 7 age is quite critical.
Yeah.
And in that time period, I lived with multiple aunts and uncles, grandparents, and on 3 different continents. So that I think is a good framing of where I am today. But anyways, 7 to 21, I grew up in Winnipeg, Winnipeg, Manitoba, did my high school and undergrad there. And then my father was doing business in Asia and had his first of 3 heart attacks around 2000.
Mm.
And so I went as the oldest. I went to essentially learn the business while he recovered. But of course, he came back, and we then expanded the business to different parts of the world. So from 21 to about almost 35, I did business in Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and then I went off and bought a company in the UK, did business in UK and France, and came back to Toronto in 2013. So I was about 33 there, and since then I've been here in Canada. So when you ask me about, what cultural, I can't remember the term that you use,
Cultural, your cultural frame of reference, because a passport is
cultural for
a piece of paper, right?
yes, yeah, exactly. I definitely identify as a third culture kid. And, for those who are new to the term, it's someone who has grown up in their development years in a culture different from the culture of their parents. So they don't fit exactly in the culture of their parents. They don't exactly fit in this new culture. They're this third culture. And so I think because of that, I definitely resonate with Canada as home. It's a very multicultural place. There's a lot of folks who have similar kind of upbringings and backgrounds that I do. And yeah, for me, I call Canada home.
Okay. That's, I think probably because I was going to attack you on this one. I won't, but
Good.
no,
Yes, please.
no, no, third culture. I've good because this is the best definition that I've ever heard about being a third culture kid. Can you repeat that, please? What
Yeah,
is a
so
third culture kid?
yeah, so the original definition, Ruth Useem developed this term in the 70s. And she was referencing actually, interestingly, expats that were from the US going to India.
Uh-huh.
And so let me go back to the definition since you asked. It is
Yeah,
someone who uh, has grown up in a culture different from the culture of their parents.
right.
So let me give folks who are listening an extreme example. Think about, someone, a blonde, blue-eyed kid in California, born in California, and his parents moved to the Philippines for some international posting.
Mhm.
And so in the Philippines, this child, blonde, blue-eyed, goes to school from K to 12, and then comes back to California for university. And most of his friends in university in California will assume he had a quote unquote traditional American upbringing,
Mhm.
and will talk to him about, I don't know, American football, etc. But in his mind, he's Filipino, so he doesn't feel like he completely connects with
Right,
some of the things that they're talking about. And then when he goes back to the Philippines, most of the people there will assume, oh, he's some kind of American tourist because he's blonde and blue eyes. So he doesn't fit exactly in the Philippines. He doesn't
right.
fit in America. He doesn't fit in the Philippines. He's this third culture. Famous third culture kid is like Barack Obama. And I think, there's positives and negatives, but on the positive side, third culture kids are able to mix with many different cultures very quickly, due to they had to build up this skill as they traveled from country to country, and recognize, listen, appreciate different perspectives, but bring that all together towards a common goal.
Right.
So when I think about the work that I do now, I'm the co-founder of a company called 369 Global.
Hmm.
We are focused on educating, informing, and activating global thinkers, and these global thinkers are like third culture kids, people who think very globally.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, thanks for the elaborate explanation for that. Um, you have a book. Show me that book again, please.
Oh
The
yes, yeah.
that
So it's just released,
Between Borders
actually.
Beyond Boundaries, right? That's the title.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's published by Forbes, and so it's a business book. Forbes being a business publication,
Mm.
but I include some stories in there of my experiences doing business in different parts of the world. And for example, and I think this will really resonate with you, Chris, because I saw you comment on this on your TED Talk.
Hmm.
I've done business with Bangladeshis in Bangladesh selling
Hmm.
products and services. Bangladeshis in the UK, in Canada, US, and they're the same, but they're all very different.
Yeah.
And so when we think about, people that are doing business globally, or you're thinking about a global career, I think it's very important to understand the nuances of different cultures in different places.
Yeah.
So that's what I talk about in the book. I use this method called the EIA method,
Uh-huh.
embed, interpret, act, and kind of guide folks through some of the ways that I implemented that strategy in different businesses.
Let me get back to that in a moment because what I got
Sure.
from in terms of prepping for this interview is that um, you you I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're helping Americans or North Americans, which would include Canadians as well, in doing business or helping them in terms of doing business internationally, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And but also companies that want to come into the North American market.
What is so my question with this is what is the most common mistake that Americans, be it Americans, America or the United States or Canadians make in terms of going abroad? What is the that you came across?
I think that's a great question, Chris. And I think, if I was going to answer that in a nutshell, the fundamental thing is this perspective that Western thought is the only thought.
Hmm.
As soon as, there was a time where you would go with your American way of doing business and kind of just implement that, be forceful with that. But the world has changed. It's much more global. I think Fareed Zakaria talks about this in a wonderful book he wrote in 2008 called The Post-American World, where he highlights that it's not just about America's position today in terms of where it's at, but it's about all of these other powers that have risen. And how does America navigate, these very influential powers in the world today? I mean, you see this happening with BRICS, the rise of these BRIC nations.
Yeah.
And how does the US, Canada, these Western nations now navigate these rising powers? So, going back to your question, it's this fundamental thought of you cannot just come with Western thought. You have to think more globally today.
Okay, I understand. So what is the big mistake? The big mistake is using Western philosophy or Western way of doing business with that?
That's correct. So let me give you a tangible example.
Yes, please.
Uber went into Malaysia to penetrate the market there in terms of ride sharing. But there was a company called Grab that really captured the market.
Hmm.
And Grab was some gentleman from Malaysia that studied in Harvard and understood the business concepts and then came back and implemented this ride sharing program called Grab, but they understood the culture of Malaysians, what
Right.
the little things that they were looking for. Whereas Uber just came in with their US way of doing business and their US business concept, right? So they weren't able to capture the market. I mean, I think now Uber has invested in Grab, so they have a business relationship, which is great. But if companies are looking to enter these markets, they must be open to understanding the nuance of cultures in the places that they're going to. We talked about India earlier, Chris.
Mhm.
India is such a massive, diverse group of people, right? How you're going to do business in one part of India is completely different from another, as you would in the US. But I think when companies go to India, they just have kind of one frame of reference to do business in India,
Yeah.
and I think that's completely incorrect.
Okay. Makes sense. Um, I have another question because you mentioned it earlier, and I'd like to come back to this one. Is you talk about, excuse me, you talk about EIA, embed, interpret, and act. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yeah, so I go through this in the book, and hindsight is 2020. So it's not like when I was 20 years old, I had this concept that I was implementing. But as I was going through the book, I wanted some easy way for people to think about as they enter a country,
Right.
and we came up with this EIA method. The embed portion is really going into a country with an open mind, really going with the perspective that I have a lot to learn here. I want to understand the nuances of
Mhm.
what's happening in this culture. What do certain gestures mean? in these cultures as opposed to the culture that I'm in, right? So
Yeah.
really embedding yourself with an open mind. The second aspect to that is interpret. And I think a lot of people misunderstand this. They go in there thinking, I'm going to embed myself and I'm going to do what they do, and interpret it that way. I think it's important to embed yourself, interpret what's happening, but the value is also bringing your own experiences to the table. That's the differentiator when you're thinking about business. It's this mix of elements, and then act. So the Grab people, the people who had this company called Grab in Malaysia,
Yeah.
did that, right? They went from Malaysia, they had their own interpretations. They went to the US and studied at Harvard, embedded themselves in that business culture, brought their own interpretation as well to that, and then acted. And that's why Grab was so successful.
Mm.
It was a mix of these different elements, these different cultures. This goes back to essentially, Chris, third culture thinking, right?
Right.
You're mixing
Yeah,
different
yeah.
cultures and then providing something unique.
So what is the one tip that not I'm going to ask you for three tips more at the end. We're not there yet. Is what is the thing you tell people? I mean, you talk to organizations and people about this, right? What is the one thing you tell them? Don't do this. As in, I'll give you an example. As in, when I talk to Dutch, I'm Dutch myself. Um, but we're talking from Paris. You're in Toronto. I'm in Paris. And by the way, this is recorded in November 2024 for the people listening in the future, just to make sure we got a date with that. Is I tell the Dutchies, don't make jokes. Don't make your Dutch jokes to really anyone because we're not funny, only to the Dutch. We're so rude in how it's really, it's over that it's fun with my son, but not for anyone else. So what do you
Right.
tell what do you tell your audience as in don't do this or do this?
Hmm. That's an interesting question and comment. I think the most important thing is don't go in with a closed mind. I think, your point about jokes in this time frame, I'm glad you mentioned the date.
Mm,
People are very sensitive to jokes right now.
true.
But so I think you need to be careful with that. But it's about going in with an open. You should not go with a closed mind. I think
Mhm.
try everything, explore everything. Some of the things that we shy away from are the ways that we can connect with people. I think every culture appreciates when you make an effort to understand that culture, try their food,
True.
say some words in their language. So if you close yourself, you're not going to be able to sell that product or service on a business side. But I think on a personal side, you're not experiencing life. You're not enriching yourself with all the things life has to offer. So you should not close yourself, would be my answer.
How how do you overcome this if you're just so stuck in your own rigid mind, as people are, as I am as
Yes.
well, and you are at certain times, I guess. I mean, we're
Yes.
all human. So how do you overcome that one? How do you keep an open mind?
I guess it depends on where you're at personally, but I've found that yes, you're right, Chris. There's times where I'm quite rigid on things, but
But everybody, I
go
mean, everybody, not
everybody
only you,
is.
right?
Yeah, everybody is.
Yeah.
But I think it's a reminder that, these opening ourselves up to experiences is valuable for ourselves. It teaches us something. And maybe not necessarily that thing that you do that you're experiencing, but you can take that lesson and implement it in some other aspect of your life, right? The value of, for example, meditating, if you go to some yoga thing or meditate, can really help you in business. But you need to open yourself up. You might not end up being, meditating every day, but that one act can open your mind to
Yeah.
other possibilities in
Yeah.
other aspects of your life.
Okay, good point. On your LinkedIn profile, Murley, you talk about a global village, right? It's something that we hear a lot. I've got some doubts about this, so I might I don't know. Let's see where we go. Um, what about EU border controls? Germany is getting border controls. Belgium, I think, is going to do the same. I wrote down some examples here. Different keyboards in France and Belgium, they use a different keyboard. Different voltages in your part of the world, it's 110. Here, it's 220 or 240. the necessity for visas for some people, but not for others. Um, if you go to India, you don't get a Big Mac, you get something different. What is the global about the whole thing here? This is, I mean, I live in Europe. The word they call it the European Union, but I wonder where the word union actually comes from because typically in Europe, okay, you have the United States of America, that's one thing, but here, okay, over to you. Global Village. I have my doubts. Sorry.
Thanks, Chris. You're right. You could go on and on with the
Yeah.
examples of challenges that everyone is facing today, and I feel those challenges that people are expressing are justified. They come from a place of pain, and these things need to be addressed, right? I think there's many cultures. I was shocked to hear that the number one food in the UK, for example, is not fish and chips. It's chicken tikka masala. Um, so
Which is really
things
good, by the way. Yeah.
which is really good.
Yeah.
I agree with you, but people are missing what the UK represented at one point, and now how things are changing. And these communities that grew up in that way, they're scared that they're going to lose that culture. And I definitely resonate with them in terms of the fears that they have. So as you mentioned, this is happening globally. People are trying to protect borders and protect the culture and heritage that they have. I don't have a simple and easy answer. I wish I did. But I think what Canada is offering in terms of its multicultural nation and society, I think there's a lot of lessons, valuable lessons that the world can look at here. And if you look at Canadians, we have about 3 million Canadians that are Canadian diaspora all over the world.
Mhm.
Many Canadians are leading these global organizations because, again, we call it mutual accommodation, is the term, defined term. They are able to recognize different cultures and bring them towards the common goal because we do this in Canada quite often.
Mhm.
This multicultural society that we have, I'm able to present myself as a Tamil Canadian. Someone can say Ukrainian Canadian, Ethiopian Canadian. Part of being Canadian is recognizing, embracing, celebrating this culture that you have, but also that is Canadian. So when we have challenges here in French Canada for French speakers, um, it is about leaning into the fact that, well, we shouldn't have that challenge because French Canada is part of this multicultural idea that we have in Canada. First Nations community is part of this multicultural aspect of Canada. And I think we Canadians have the opportunity to show leadership and show a pathway of how these different cultures and different countries can do that as well. No one wants to come to Germany let's say a Pakistani person doesn't want to leave Pakistan to come to another Pakistan.
Mhm.
They're coming to Germany to appreciate German culture and the jokes, perhaps, Chris. Um,
I got my, sorry, no, no, go, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think we just need to find a way to embrace these cultures that we have that are unique within this global aspect.
Isn't, okay, we have been recording for about 30 minutes, and that's about the listening span I think that most audience can muster. A Pakistani, and this is with all respect to all Pakistanis who are listening to this podcast, and this is just an example. Isn't a Pakistani leaving Pakistan to lead a better life and then go to Germany? I mean,
Yes, you're right, but a better life could be they could stay in Pakistan and do those things and not want to leave the place that they're in, but they're leaving for a reason. Sometimes it's not a positive reason. Maybe they're for example, in my culture, Tamil Sri Lankans, we a lot of people left due to the civil war. But you always, when people are coming to Canada, I believe they are not coming to start up their own country within Canada. Do
No.
they want to connect with their own culture? Yes, absolutely. But they're coming here for Canada to embrace Canadian culture. And I think that happens similarly in Germany. Yes, there are people escaping war, etc., but
Yeah.
this country has welcomed you. This country has embraced you, created a safe haven. I think, part of that responsibility as someone coming into this country is to appreciate and embrace the culture that you're in, not to leave your own culture, but to embrace the
Yeah, yeah.
culture that you're in
Yeah.
as well.
And you can never leave your own country. I mean, I've been out of the Netherlands for about 20 years, and I'm as Dutch as you can find them, really, to be
Yes.
honest. So, which is what it is, and I realize that, and sometimes it helps, and sometimes it hinders. So it's part
Yeah.
of not living in your own country. Um, I'm going to ask you two final questions, which is, can you give us three tips to become more culturally competent from your own personal experience, be it personal or work-wise?
I think three great tips. I'm going to save the last one for some business promotion, perhaps. But
No, go
I
ahead.
think
That's fine.
I think definitely immersing yourself in different cultures is a huge way. Travel for those who can afford to do it, I think is an excellent way. And really trying to avoid staying in these again, Western brand hotels, etc. But immersing yourself in the culture is a fantastic way. Here in Canada, it's also about, if you can't afford to travel, maybe you can go to a restaurant within the culture and see what's happening in terms of the food, how people eat, how people have conversations, etc. These can be very enriching for you as well. Um, the second aspect I think is important when you're in a country, I love sports. And for me, Chris, sports has been a real connector when I'm in a new country. If although I was born in the UK, I didn't know much about cricket. But when I started working in Asia, obviously cricket was massive. And so when I would go to a cricket game, as long as you understood the basics of, when someone hits a shot and it's a six, everyone's cheering. You don't have to connect over language. You can high five and, celebrate with people. And that really brings some bonding together, especially if the team is losing and then they win, you've created some friendships and bonding. The same thing applies if you come to Canada and you're watching ice hockey.
Mhm.
You can also build relationships. That's outside of language.
Yeah.
So I think these opportunities really connect folks. The
I've,
last thing I would,
I've watched multiple videos trying to understand cricket. I still don't.
the
I'm sorry. Sorry, I
the
interrupted you. Go ahead with number three, please.
the T20 matches are a good one to watch, Chris, for cricket. Those are quite exciting.
Okay.
So the last one is, of course, my book is just coming out. It's released on December 3rd, so you can pre-order it on Amazon. Between Borders, Beyond Boundaries. And this book, I really goes through the Embed, Interpret, Act that I was talking about on the podcast today, but also shares some stories of me doing business in Asia, in Europe, and here in North America. And there's a lot of success stories, but there's a lot more failures that I think
Mm.
are lessons learned. And the last thing I wanted to share here is we launched this on September 3rd of 2024. This
Cool.
is Three Magazine. You will notice the tagline for Three Magazine is very familiar. It's between borders, beyond boundaries.
Yeah.
Three is connected to third culture kids. That's why we call it Three. And it's a print publication every quarter. There's an online aspect, and then we also have a podcast, Chris, called Third Culture Leaders, where we
Okay.
identify these folks that are doing things globally. We shoot the podcast all over the world. I was recently in India and in Dubai with some guests there. But why talk about these two? The book and the magazine. I think the book is helpful if someone is looking for a deep dive in terms of
Mhm.
doing global business or a global career.
Mhm.
But also, a lot of people tell me, well, how do I embed myself in global understanding? Well, I think subscribing to Three Magazine or whatever magazine that's a global publication,
Yeah.
understanding the stories and seeing the different things that are happening globally, I think can be a great opportunity for you to then interpret where is the places that you would like to live in different parts of the world, or the opportunities that you will take. And maybe there will be some other Dutch folks like you, Chris, that look at Paris as an opportunity.
Who knows? There are so many Dutchies here around. It's amazing. But it's a fantastic city. Anyways, yeah, I would consider The Economist part of this as well, by the way,
Yes,
which is
the econ
my go-to source of information.
The Economist is a great one. There's a publication called Monocle,
Uh-huh.
actually founded by a Canadian gentleman, but lives in I think he lives in England and Switzerland. But Monocle is a global brand as well, which I think is fantastic. Look, we're just starting out in the magazine, but always looking for contributors, and very excited to see where this magazine will take us.
Yeah. If you need some inspiration, if you need contribution, give me a call. You know where to
Absolutely.
find me.
Thank you, Chris.
Last question before you go, before I let you go, is how can
Sure.
people get in touch with you, please?
Great. I'm always active on LinkedIn, so that's a great way. And they can check out my website, which is Muralys, as in
Say that again, please.
Srinarayanathas,
M-U-R.
Muralys
Uh-huh.
.com. That's my website. So you can
That'll be in
find
the show
all
notes at
the
least.
information.
All
Yeah.
right. Great. Excellent. Thanks so much, Murali, for getting on the show here. Thanks for your elaborating on the way of thinking and sharing your experience. And I'm pretty sure we'll talk to each other in the future.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been
You're
great.
more than welcome.